avez bien compris, donc on va faire le monument pour protéger les noms de ces soldats. Donc ils ont été recherchés sous terre, sous la terre, à côté de l'église. La voûte d'un bâtiment qui est encore enterré, qui est cassé. Donc c'est du XIIe siècle. Ils sont allés rechercher sous terre les dalles du cloître du Moyen-Âge, XIIe siècle, pour que cela protège les noms des soldats canadiens pour l'éternité. Et tous les ans, donc, il y a cette cérémonie le 7 juin, avec beaucoup de personnalités, beaucoup de monde. Tout le jardin est plein pour rendre hommage aux soldats canadiens. Voilà, le souvenir du Canada, le sacrifice du Canada pour la libération de l'Europe.
In the morning, so they had done the job at the last minute.
Notre camarade qui organisait les parachutages d'armes était arrêté depuis le 14 décembre 1943.
So one of their colleagues who was organizing the drop of arms and guns had been arrested on the 14th of December.
Il a été torturé.
Well, he was tortured and tortured and tortured.
Et il est donc arrivé avec la Gestapo à 8h30 et nous étions partis depuis 4h.
So he arrived and he was arrested at 8:30, but all the other team members were gone in the night at 4 in the morning, so they were saved.
Toutes les armes ont été sauvées.
All the guns were saved.
Nous les avons utilisés à partir du 6 juin 1944.
All those guns served after the June 6th when they were used by the resistance, 1 ton of guns.
À ce moment-là, nous avons été très actifs dans la résistance, mais, comme ils n'ont pas pu récupérer les armes, ils ont arrêté ma mère.
They were very active in the resistance after the June 6, 1944, and the Gestapo was frustrated because they could not find the guilty culprit, so they arrested his mother.
Elle est restée plusieurs mois en prison à Caen.
She was put in jail for several months in Caen.
Mon père est parti au camp de concentration de Mauthausen en Autriche.
His father was sent to Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria.
Nous avons combattu avec nos amis canadiens.
So the resistance fighters fought with the Canadian soldiers.
Nous avions avec nous, dans la résistance, des aviateurs canadiens qui avaient été abattus, qui sont restés avec nous pendant plusieurs mois dans la résistance et qui ont combattu jusqu'à la fin de la bataille de Normandie avec nous.
They had several members of the RCF, Canadian aircrew, had been shot down, who joined them, and they fought with these guys until the liberation as resistance fighters. So they were French and Canadians.
Après les Canadiens, nous avons rejoint l'armée américaine de Patton.
After the liberation here by Canadian forces, they joined the U.S. Army under General Patton, the Third Army, Patton's Third Army. Pourquoi que je demandais vous êtes allé avec les amis?
pour rejoindre la 2e division blindée du général Leclerc.
The reason they did that is because under the American command, you had the 2nd French armored division, the Free French, so they wanted to fight with the French soldiers.
Nous avons participé à la libération d'Alençon et à la fermeture de la poche de Falaise.
They participated in the Battle of Alençon, and he was actually involved in the closing of the Falaise Gap,
où nous avons retrouvé nos amis canadiens que nous avions laissés à Caen pour fermer de l'autre côté la poche de Falaise.
And it's ironic because as they closed the Falaise Gap under the 2nd French Armored Division, they joined the Canadian troops closing the gap. So twice he joined them.
Nous avons retrouvé nos amis polonais
They also joined their Polish friends.
et nous sommes partis pour la libération de Paris.
So they went to Paris to liberate Paris.
Après Paris, nous sommes partis dans les Vosges.
And they continued in the southern French in the Vosges area.
Nous avons surpris les Allemands le 13 septembre.
On the 13th of September, they surprised the Germans.
En une journée, nous avons détruit 65 chars allemands.
In one day, they destroyed 65 German tanks.
J'étais dans les chars
So he was quelle était votre position? Qu'est-ce que vous faisiez?
de reconnaissance.
He was in the reconnaissance unit of the armored division, so he was in a tank crew.
Et ensuite, ça a été la libération de Strasbourg.
So they reached Strasbourg and they liberated Alsace and Lorraine.
La campagne d'Allemagne et nous avons terminé la guerre à Berchtesgaden.
Well, he went all the way to Berchtesgaden in Germany, so he entered Germany, the 2nd Armored Division, and finished the war in Germany with the French troops.
Et nous nous sommes organisés ensuite pour garder la mémoire de nos amis canadiens qui ont été assassinés ici à Ardennes, qui ont été assassinés à Auty, qui ont été assassinés à Audrieux, qui ont été assassinés à Cheux par la 12e Panzer SS.
Alors, lorsqu'il est revenu, when he came back from the war, he continued to honor the memory of the Canadians who were murdered here, who were murdered at Auty, who were murdered at Audrieux, and by the 12th SS Panzer Division, and that's why they preserved the Abbey for this.
Ma mère est allée témoigner au procès à Auric en Allemagne, dans cette caserne de la Kriegsmarine, où a été jugé, condamné Kurt Meyer.
So his mother actually went to Germany. This is a story I didn't tell you. The trial was held in Canada for Kurt Meyer. He asked for a German trial, and they retried him in Germany. His mother was there in the German Navy barrack. C'est à quel endroit encore?
C'était en Allemagne du Nord, dans une caserne de la Kriegsmarine, à Auric.
Auric. So in northern Germany, in Auric. So she participated in that trial.
Kurt Meyer a été condamné à mort, mais il n'a pas été exécuté, car le tribunal n'a pas pu apporter la preuve que c'est lui qui avait donné l'ordre d'exécuter ses soldats.
So Kurt Meyer was tried and condemned to death, and because the prosecution could not prove without a reasonable doubt that he had given the order himself to murder the Canadian, his sentence was commuted to imprisonment. Combien de temps il a passé en prison?
Il est resté 12 ans en prison à Rochester, et au Canada.
He stayed 12 years in jail in Rochester in Canada. So who said that today? Who was the guy I argued with today? George?
Quand il a été libéré, il a fait 3 choses.
When he was released, he did 3 things, Kurt Meyer, after 12 years in jail.
La première chose, il est venu ici, à Ardennes, contester le témoignage de ma mère et de mon frère qui avait provoqué sa condamnation à mort.
The first thing he did, he came back here in Ardennes and he officially contested the testimony of his mother and his brother who had forced his imprisonment. That's what Kurt Meyer did.
La deuxième chose, il a créé l'Association internationale de fidélité à la Waffen-SS.
The second thing he did, he created an international organization association of faithful followers and ex-members of the Waffen-SS, so they would survive as a veterans organization after the war.
They turn inland and revisit the scene of an atrocity inflicted on prisoners of war, an event that led to one of the first World War II crime convictions in Europe.
Guys, I don't see a sign, but this has to be the Ardennes Abbey.
I've heard some pretty chilling stories about this place.
We're gonna go meet Jacques Vico. He was a French resistance fighter during the war. He's familiar with the dark history surrounding this place.
Jim, this was an abbey before the war?
It's a very old abbey, and with the French Revolution it was closed, became a farm.
So why would the SS have taken it over? Why did they make this their headquarters?
Well, it's close to Cannes. Also, it's an elevated piece of ground, so from that church tower, the SS could see for miles. They could see down to Juno Beach, and they certainly saw the Canadians coming.
My mother was released from prison at the end of March 1944.
À la fin du mois de mars 1944. Elle est revenue ici à Ardennes au mois de
2 months after the liberation of Ardennes.
2 mois après la libération d'Ardennes par les troupes canadiennes.
This was the site of a battle. There was no roof left, no frame. The house had collapsed. All that was left were ruins. My mother had been there 8 days when a Canadian sergeant arrived, a tall, burly fellow. He told my mother he came back to Ardennes because some of his comrades had been killed at the Ardennes Abbey. Before the war, little white flowers would grow around the edges of the lawn. In March 1945, instead of growing around the edges, these little white flowers were growing everywhere on the lawn. My mother and my younger brother Michel said they, the Germans, disturbed the lawn and in the process separated the flower bulbs. They were trying to hide something. My younger brother Michel started digging a hole and immediately stumbled onto the corpse of a Canadian soldier. So now we know for certain that 20 Canadian soldiers were assassinated and buried in these grounds. The corpses were buried beneath the lawn on either side of the flower bed you see there. There was no flower bed at the time. There were some buried here and some between the chestnut tree and the rock at back. There were some on the other side of the chestnut tree, including one I found myself. The discovery of this killing field prompted one of the first war crimes convictions in Europe.
Why, in your estimation, why would these Canadians volunteer to fight a war that's not in their country?
When you talk to them, when you talk to the veterans, I remember a conversation with one of them whose comrades belonged to the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada in Toronto. He found the bodies of his comrades. He had come back for the 40th anniversary, and I asked him, "So, how do you feel 40 years later?" He answered, "You know, we volunteered. We were only 20. We had fire in our hearts and we were fighting for freedom. It gave us courage."